Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session, ThetaRay, Travelex, and FINTRAIL on using artificial intelligence for transaction monitoring and sanction screening. My name is Braine. I'm a managing director at FINTRAIL, and we're a global financial crime consultancy that works predominantly with fintechs and digital banking products to design and implement cutting-edge, tech-enabled financial crime programs. And I'm delighted to be chairing this discussion today with ThetaRay and Travelex, and hearing from Travelex on their experiences using ThetaRay's AI product to redefine and enhance their financial crime controls in the areas of transaction monitoring and sanction screening. So let me hand over to our panelists to introduce themselves further. Célia, would you like to go first?
Yes. First of all, thanks for this opportunity, for the invitation to be part of this. I am Célia Pizzi, Chief Compliance Officer from Travelex Bank in Brazil. I've been working in the compliance and the AML market for more than 30 years, and have always been in the financial market for national and international banks and different kinds of financial services. A year ago, I joined the Travelex group. Travelex operates globally in over 20 countries and is one of the biggest remittance companies in the world. The Brazilian entity is unique. It serves as a foreign exchange licensed bank in Brazil, which means it must meet specific standards and requirements from regulators. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Peter, over to you.
Yes, hello, good morning, good afternoon. Célia, thank you so much. Lovely to see you, and really appreciate you joining today. My name's Peter Reynolds. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of ThetaRay. I have the pleasure of traveling around the world now again, not just on Zoom, talking about AML. I was recently in Sao Paulo with Célia, which was lovely. ThetaRay helps in four main ways. I'm just going to jump into four key things that ThetaRay does. We help organizations increase revenue by helping them do business in countries that were difficult before, or using products that they couldn't before. And I think maybe Célia might touch some of that today. We'll talk a lot about risk and reducing risk. I always get very strong relationships with heads of compliance, and reducing risk is really, really important. And enabling a true risk-based approach to AML is something that we do day in, day out. We help reduce costs. We're going to talk a lot about today about false positives and what that can do in terms of your cost base, and we'll talk about that. And then, as Célia said, it's a lot of it's about helping customers maintain the correct regulatory relationship they need in this space. So thank you very much. Absolutely great to be here today, and I look forward to the conversation.
Brilliant. Great. Both, thank you very much. So let me briefly start by setting the scene and just running through what we're here to discuss today. So the use of artificial intelligence in financial crime compliance is a hot topic, and it's clearly no longer a theoretical concept. It's been discussed for a while, but it is now being used in practice. And AI is obviously a broad term, and there are many different areas where different forms of artificial intelligence can be deployed within financial crime. But probably the clearest use cases and the main areas of adoption and interest at present are transaction monitoring and screening. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. So Peter, perhaps you could start with giving us a brief introduction to ThetaRay's transaction monitoring and screening solution, and what it is about those activities which lend themselves to AI, and how a tool like ThetaRay's can transform them and have the most impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to apologize if anyone can hear thunder, but in London, the weather's getting quite rough. So Célia, probably different to where you are in Sao Paulo right now, but I'll try and carry on. Look, transaction monitoring and sanction screening, I get to talk to a lot of people about, and I often put it like this. When you go to an airport and you check a bag, it's very important that the airport checks who you are before they check your bag. Obviously, you want to know who's on your plane. But in its own, that's not good enough. I would hope I never got to check in with someone whose name didn't ring any bells, and they just threw the bag on the plane and said, I'm sure it's got nothing in it we're worried about. But that's not what they do. What airports do is they then screen and monitor what's in the bag. And I think that's what I'm here to talk about today. And this is what ThetaRay does very well. We enable our customers to do sanction screening and do it very well, and make sure that if you can't work with a certain person or organization, then that is stopped from happening. But also by constantly monitoring the transactions to find things that sanction screening on its own will not find. I think, unfortunately, if I'm a criminal, I probably have learned by now not to send payments in my name with my home address and hope they get through. I'm probably doing something more complex than that. And its importance has come to the front so much. We're in a horrible situation where there's actually wars, where governments are using exclusion from financial markets as a weapon to try and prevent a war. And so the responsibility to be able to then act on that, not only is a very important moral responsibility that we all take very seriously, but it's something that a regulator is going to look at with huge amounts of detail, because you can't have government saying, listen, we're going to do X, and then the members of the financial services not enforcing it. So it's become more important. And I often joke that recently my mother asked me about SWIFT. I've worked in payments for 25 years and she's never asked me about SWIFT. And I realized there's been so much news about, how the SWIFT system can prevent things, and often that news not correct or not accurate, but still it's become front of mind for everyone in everything we do. And then to kind of jump into your AI situation, I think the best way of answering how AI can be put into this capability is to think about, how do you do it without AI? So if you don't have AI, what you do is you have a rules-based approach. And rules-based approaches are fine, but there's three problems. They will always be as smart as the person writing the rule. So the rules-based can have problems if they're not accurately updated. Secondly, a rules-based approach will be beaten by a criminal's machine learning approach. And this is the problem, is that today's criminals, aren't wearing balaclavas, waving guns. They are data farms, farming data and using AI to beat your rules defense. And then the third one is something we see so much, is that a rules-based system will have human bias. It's not possible not to have. You're asking a human to predetermine what a bad guy might do and hope that what he says or she says is right. And you'll always have human bias. And I see this, the privilege I have is traveling around the world. You see what people say are the main rules they might build. And you notice in Brazil and New York and Spain, they're different, because we have different human bias in different areas. So really, when you use AI and data, what you find is it's kind of an unfair fight. AI will start finding the unknown unknowns, and it's something we see a lot. We see that customers will come to us and say, hey, we think we've got this. Let's see if your system finds this. And our system often finds this and a few other things, because AI in its purest form is not about finding something a human says find. It's about using AI to actually understand what normal looks like, and then find out what's not normal in your current, and in this case, payments. And this is what's, very, very powerful. And what you should find in that, and if I look at some comparisons we have done, a recent customer very proudly talked to us about a 29% detection worthy rate. So what they were telling us, this it was actually a prospect at the time, 29% of the time that we alert, it's something that we should alert on. And the interesting thing, this was quite a high number, they thought. And we did a comparison using AI versus their rules-based approach, and it increased to 78%. And actually now they're live, it's actually up to 96%. So by taking AI versus rules-based tech, you will make sure that when you are alerting, you're alerting on things that the bank or the fintech or whoever that you're doing it or they're doing it with is actually a detection-worthy result. And added to that, you reduce the number of alerts. So we see in our customers sometimes reducing 90% of alerts. So we reduce the amount, but increase the detection worthiness. And this is fundamental. And this is why AI in this fight is so important. And if you also think about my last kind of point on this, I get to see how people are using other bits of technology before we get involved. And often, and please, this is nothing to do with Travelex, this is experiences around the world, we see that they might be trying to say use a fraud system, which is a kind of point in time system. When you're trying to fight fraud, you're often saying, is this Peter that's making the transaction, yes or no, let him or don't. When it comes to transaction monitoring and using AI, the whole point is that you need to be looking at flows of funds, timing of funds, repeating funds. And this is what, if you have a rules-based or kind of like a point-in-time approach to fighting financial crime, you'll always come unstuck. Maybe that's quite a long-winded answer to what you asked, but that's kind of what pops into mind.
I think, and those are all hugely valuable points. And I think the point about reducing the number of false positives, essentially, you reduce the overall number of alerts, but make sure that, you know, in that case, 96% of them are actually alerts you want to look at. It also highlights something else which is interesting. It's the idea that AI isn't replacing your human analysts. You still need them to review those alerts. You're just making sure that everything, or a much greater proportion of what your human analysts are doing, is actually worthwhile. What it's getting rid of is all of the meaningless, you know, the false positives that someone looks at, dismisses, moves on, and which is essentially a waste of time. You still need people to review this, but they are reviewing meaningful outputs. And yeah, which has a huge impact both on efficiency and also morale and engagement with the work you're doing. So it's really clear how it can have such a positive impact. On the counter side, I think one of the reasons we've seen talking to clients that they can sometimes be reluctant or not sure about adopting AI is that it can seem very intimidating, right? So financial crime professionals are rarely AI or data specialists. They only come from other paths. And so they may struggle with the technological concepts or understanding how AI really works. And whilst even those who are really excited about it and would like to learn more, they're also hugely busy people who can't necessarily devote that much time to learning and assimilating this very new and complex topic. So how can we get around that issue, and how can you get from the point of, you know, AI experts designing these tools in an academic setting or a more theoretical setting to putting them to use in real financial institutions and having them used by practitioners? Like, is the lack of specialist knowledge within financial institutions a real barrier, or are there ways to design tools such that they are easily used by people without that expertise?
Yeah, great question. And look, you get different types of customers around the world, but I think you've said something so important, and I'm sure, having met Célia and her team, a lot of it's about, at the top level, it's about staff engagement. If I'm a financial crime analyst and I'm spending 70% of my day chasing things that aren't bad things, that's not good. That's not what I want to do. I want to be chasing bad guys and finding crime. And I think your point about having the right tools to make sure that your team are being used in the right way is really, really important. My next point, and this comes from a customer. I didn't come up with this phrase. I liked it, so I use it a lot. Someone talked to me about why they like ThetaRay, and they talked about the combination of AI and human intelligence. So artificial intelligence, human intelligence from our team. I think it's so important, whether you ThetaRay or any vendor in AI, is that you move away from it being a buzzword and something that sounds like it should cost more because we're talking about AI, to how do you practically put it into production at a financial institution that's regulated. And from my point of view, we've spent a lot of money on the front end of the product, the investigation center. So you don't have to be a PhD physicist to understand what's happening. You can look at an alert, you can see why it's happened, you can see what it probably means, and then there's a workflow that means you can work on it. And I think this is what's fundamentally important. That's point one. And then point two, I think so often in the industry, AI is used as like a thing, as a sales point on its own. But actually, and I'm sure later on you'll talk to Célia about this, but just because ThetaRay has AI is not the point. That's not, Célia, none of our customers were ever saying, hey, we're looking for AI. They were looking for a business problem. And if you think about, so one of the things we do, which we really like, is we'll reduce the investigation time by 50% of an alert. And I think that's really important. If I'm a bank or if I'm a fintech, that's the problem. The problem wasn't I needed AI. Now, if you can show me how AI can achieve that goal, and maybe it's reducing investigation time, maybe it's increasing detection worthiness, maybe it's reducing the number of alerts because, hey, we want a better customer experience, then that's what I think we need to spend our time talking to financial institutions about. And I think that's fundamentally where the industry is looking for help with AI. They don't just want AI, there's business problems. And if you show how AI can solve those problems, then most industries now are using AI. I think the four things that become really, really important, and I think technological advancements over the last few years have made it possible, is your AI should come out of the box. If you go back 5-10 years, someone would say, listen, we'll sell you something that has AI, and then it will learn for a year or 6 months, and then we'll get results. We don't have customers that can wait a year for learning. So your AI has to come out with those models that can be turned on we have models that can be turned on in days. And I think that's really, really important. I think you can't have this fallback that so many technology companies have, which is, but the data's not perfect. Newsflash, financial institutions don't have perfect data. So if you need perfect data for your models to work, they just don't work. It's just, there's nothing, you can't go to a bank and say, give us perfect data. You'll be waiting 2 years to get perfect data. And then I think also importantly, to make AI something that institutions can use in the front line and for important things like financial crime, is that you have to bring knowledge. So, it's important to me and ThetaRay, and I think everyone in this industry, is to come with predefined triggers. Don't wait to be told by a bank what's financial crime. Come and say, well, look, here's the certain things we see that will be crime. Let's start looking at that. And then obviously, and I think this is now, gone as a thing that shouldn't be the case, is cloud. Like, implement this on the cloud. And, I don't want to, we just did an implementation at a tier 1 financial institution in Europe, one of the biggest banks in the world. And we implemented it start to finish in 3 months. And the reason that is everything I've just said. The models come out of the box. We don't need perfect data. We've got existing triggers and we can be on the cloud. So you don't need to waste time with, on-prem deployments. And of course, these things are naturally much quicker if you can do them on things like the cloud. So that's kind of my view on it. And I think it's something we see repeating itself wherever we have these conversations.
Excellent. Hopefully there's some reassurance in there for any firms who are looking to do this, that it's definitely, if nothing else, you should be having this conversation to see what is possible, and that, don't be put off by not having the perfect data or knowing exactly what you need or having the expertise to be able to work out what exactly you want the system to do, that actually it isn't as complicated as that. It is something that you should look to see if it could help with current processes. So let's hear from an actual user about the experience of adopting an AI solution. Célia, could you maybe start by telling us why you were looking for a new tool and exploring the possibility of adopting ThetaRay and the AI capabilities in the first place?
Yeah, we are looking for a better, as Peter say, a better way to evaluate our alert. And we started with a proof of concept. That's always an excellent way to evaluate a tool and initially understand the possibilities and limitations. We consult another solutions, and we must focus in some important points. Explainability is very important. A provider has to explain to you how it will work and practice and how it will work for your business. Not theoretical, sorry for that, explanations of all the clever stuff it can do. Ongoing support is necessary, not just a point of sale. What ongoing support and communication with the provider will you have? How responsive are they? The interface is important. Analysts need a tool they can work with easily, user-friendly, quick implementation. We didn't have a year to set up a project to investigate AI tools. Select a partner and get things set up. We need to have something up and running in X months, 3, 4 months, very quickly. And that's all in my case.
I think those are some really excellent points, and it is interesting, as you say, like all of the clever things that a tool can do. And I can understand if you are an AI expert and you've spent all of this time designing, you know, the perfect AI solution, that's something which you're going to be very proud of and want to focus on. But often it is those more traditional aspects, as you say, the customer support, the ongoing support, and the interface, and things like that, which actually make the difference to the end practitioner. So it's not something that's new to the AI tool; it's something that you would need for any solution. And as Peter said before, it's, you know, you don't start by looking for an AI tool, you start by looking for a tool that will offer you all of that and then reduce your false positives alert, reduce the time spent on investigations, etc. And if AI is the best way to do that, then that's great. But that's the angle that practitioners look at when selecting the tool. And was there a particular driver for this in terms of your business model? Because you mentioned you want a tool that suits your particular business. And when there's a sort of the case study of Travelex, you mentioned it's a pretty unique case in that it's part of this larger remittances firm, but that within Brazil, it's actually a regulated as a bank. And so what the business use case was for selecting a new tool?
Oh, we have a mass payments services that we need to improve that and to process in a quickly, very fast movement. We need to have fast process. We need to do this in pre-operation. Before the operation done, we need to check all of them. And we need this done, something more than thousands of them in a minute. Then ThetaRay can answer us to this time that we need for processing.
Interesting, which I guess it's a good example of the value of the right solution, and that compliance tools can often be seen as an additional cost. Compliance has to go to the business and make a business case for buying a new solution, spending money on a new tool. But in cases like this, if you're offering a new product, having the right compliance tools can actually be a driver for growth. Like AI and the right kind of tools can allow businesses to scale at speed. So you want to do this new business. So in this case, you're processing thousands of payments in such a short amount of time. This is a great new area of business, but you need the right tools to support the compliance team to do that. But with those right tools, you can then take on new products and new business areas, and firms can expand and feel safe that they are not taking on new unexpected risks in the process. And so investing in these tools can actually be part of your growth rather than just a cost center. You're just spending money on compliance to tick a box rather than it actually generating money for your business. You mentioned briefly at the start the regulators and the need to show the regulators. So in this case, you're managing what is a potentially high-risk product, right, with a mass payments. Do you think that regulators are open to the concept of using AI and are supportive of firms that do use it? What's been your experience, Célia?
I sincerely believe that the regulators are also looking for better ways to supervise and control issues. The market changes quickly, and new tools and solutions must be considered. We can't keep looking for one particular transaction in a million of them. We can't use just a single rule showing just one perspective. I think it's mandatory to look for scenarios, situations, statistics, etc. Then, in my opinion, I believe the regulators are supportive of new technologies once they have the opportunity to knowledge them and access to them and see how this working.
Yeah. Peter, any thoughts from you on that? Have you had the chance to interact with regulatory bodies or with firms who have had conversations with regulators about the use of AI and technologies?
Yeah, and it's always the customer of ThetaRay. So it's the bank or the financial institution that's regulated. And so we are a support partner in that. The good news that means is that we've gone through it hundreds of times. We have global banks around the world. We are used all over the world. And so firstly, I think that's a benefit that we can help. But it's also important, and we picked up on this with the process we were in with Célia and her team, is that they wanted to make sure no stone was left unturned, that what they were doing, the regulator would be happy with. So I think it's kudos to having a smart team, but also a team that's embracing technology. And Célia, you put it so right, I don't think it's 1 in a million, Célia. It's probably 1 in 100 million. It's such a small thing you're looking for that I think it was known very early on by Célia and her team that if they were to build some rules, that it wouldn't be what there would be so much risk of missing that 1 in 100 million that it wasn't going to work. And so our job then comes to support Célia and her team with what they need. Now, as I say, we have some value add here in so much as we've gone through the process a lot. We're lucky enough as a team, as a company, to be used by some of the fraud investigation units around the world. So we know what the governments themselves want to do when they're looking at these programs. And I think it's very important that we meet the regulators to understand. And I think Célia is 100% right with the way she put it. And I put it in 3 phases. I talk about transparency, traceability, and visibility. So the days of having some crazy model say this is what you need to do aren't going to work. You need to be very transparent in why something's alerted or not. Then you need the traceability to follow that through down to the actual reason and to be able to very easily say to a regulator, this is why we didn't pick that up. This is why we did pick this up. And then the visibility to make sure it's a very transparent process that anyone from anywhere can see. So I think it's always going to be taking a regulator on a journey. I do agree with Celia's point that this isn't new to regulators. If anything, regulators are themselves pushing, you must use more technology. You really must take a very proactive approach. You can't, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but if you think about a rules-based approach to sanction screening or to transaction monitoring, let's say people started using that in the 70s, maybe 60s. I don't think if you take something that's been around since the 70s and adapted it a bit, I don't think you would realistically think that the modern, money laundering firm is not going to be able to outdo what you were using for the last 40 years. So I think the need and the ability to use AI in this crucial fight, I don't think we need to argue that that's something that you should be doing. I think it's more when and how people are going to do it. That would be my take on the market as we see it today.
Yep, I would have to agree with that. And obviously the messaging is there from regulators and from industry bodies like the Financial Action Task Force, for instance, that has produced a report on the use of new technologies. And it clearly states that it is supportive and that FIs should be looking at new technological solutions. And also, as you say, I don't think anyone's going to argue that the current solution is working well and we don't need to make changes. I think everyone agrees that we are not, and we need to find a way to be more efficient and actually achieve better results and identifying that needle in the haystack. So then I think that links back to your point on the transparency and the visibility. Regulators in theory are supportive of this, but they do want to understand what you're doing, and they want to be very sure that you understand what you're doing and you haven't purchased a solution which claims to do all of these things, but is something of a black box and you can't really explain what's happening. But as long as you can explain the tool and what it's doing and then explain the outputs that it's generating, which should also enable you to show that they are hopefully better than the outputs you were getting before, then that should be a fairly easy journey to take the regulators on. They want to be supportive and they want firms to find better technological solutions. So as long as you can explain why what you're using is an improvement, they will be supportive of that. You don't have to argue with them. They're going into it from a frame of mind where they want to be persuaded. They want to see that you're using a better tool.
Yeah, and it was, I think, sorry, just to add to that, also, I think there's safety in numbers. I know my friends at Travelex did a lot of, knowing who else uses us. I think it's one thing you need to show the regulator your plan, but also, the fact that, these load of banks and these load of fintechs also use it, and this is where they've used it. I think that becomes quite important in obviously a conservative industry as the regulator. The regulator is not looking for you to come with some fancy thing that no one else has ever tried. They're probably going to raise their eyebrows and say, what? Well, hang on. But it's what are the fundamentals of good compliance management, which that's not on us, that's on Travelex and their team, and they have that in spades. Anyone who is ever in Sao Paulo, I recommend going to see the offices of Travelex. It's a very professional setup. And then it's taking what is, I think, very good modern technology, and Israeli technology is well known for being very state of the art, and combining that, going back to my point originally about artificial intelligence backed up by human intelligence, is going to be a big tick to a regulator, a big tick to everyone apart from the financial criminals, we hope, who don't get to exploit systems or loopholes.
Yeah, please say the one party that we don't want to come out of this, feeling positive about the adoption of this technology. Thank you both very much. I think there's some real food for thought there and some really good examples of how this can help firms to strengthen their programs. I think it is a case of strengthening and improving rather than thinking of it as radically transforming. It isn't. It's building on what you currently do. It's building on your team's current expertise, the systems you have in place, but working out how to make them so much more effective and efficient and generating much more meaningful outputs where you become so much more effective at actually identifying and therefore stopping financial crime. And it needn't be as daunting as you think. It isn't as unexplainable. It isn't a total black box. And it needn't take as long as you might think in terms of setting it up, making sure that the data is of a usable quality, making sure your team have the skills and knowledge to understand how to use the system. All of that is quite probably more straightforward than some firms may be expecting. And so hopefully it has given some reassurance to start some teams on that journey. So with that, thank you very much, Célia, for sharing your experiences with us. It's always really great to hear from an actual practitioner, not just the theory of how great it might be to have this kind of tool, but to hear how that's actually working in practice. And Peter, thank you so much for your insights and your expert view on ThetaRay and how that has worked for your many clients across the banking sector. So thank you both very much for being here with us. We will share the contact details, make sure those are available. And if anyone would like to talk either to Travelex about their experiences with this tool, to ThetaRay about learning more about the tool, or FINTRAIL support on implementing, selecting a provider and then implementing and using AI solutions, please do feel free to get in touch with any of us. We would all love to carry on that conversation. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.